An attempted terror attack in New York City, the latest on Iran and what's going on with the Strait of Hormuz. And we're going to talk about a new flap between Kamala Harris and Gavin Newsom. All of that and so much more today on 10-Minute Drill.
Everybody get up, get up.
The story of America is the story of an adventure.
I can hear you. The rest of the world hears you.
We are a nation under God, and I believe God intended for us to be free.
First, over the weekend, President Trump participated in a dignified transfer for the first 6 fallen heroes from our bombing in Iran. Those heroes' names were Captain Cody Cork, Sergeant First Class Noah Tegens, Sergeant First Class Nicole Armour, Sergeant Declan Cody, Major Jeffrey O'Brien, and Chief Warrant Officer Robert Marzan. Over to Iran. It has now been 9 days since the initial bombs began dropping in Tehran. Here is White House Press Secretary Caroline Leavitt with an update on how things have gone thus far.
We have completely wiped out their Navy. Their Navy is now deemed combat ineffective. Their retaliatory strikes with ballistic missiles has decreased 90%.
One thing we talked about last week was with the opportunity to strike so much of Iran's leadership in one fell swoop, they had to speed things up a little bit from what they had initially planned. And I think they would still very much argue that with the success Caroline outlined so far, it was worth it to do that. But with that, some of the other challenges that have arisen that I'm sure they were prepared for were things like traffic in the Strait of Hormuz and the fact that so many oil tankers and large ships carrying supplies all around the world have been frozen in place, not sure if the strait is open or set yet, which has had a major impact on things like oil prices, which can downstream impact gas prices. But here is Energy Secretary Chris Wright talking about that.
Yeah, the plan is to get oil and natural gas and fertilizer and all the products from the Gulf flowing through the straits before too long. And I may break a little news here, but one large tanker has already gone through the straits with no issues at all.
So as you likely woke up to yesterday morning, there was a period overnight where oil prices had risen over $100 a barrel, but they also came back down as people are sort of waiting to see what President Trump and what all the allied countries that are now fighting against Iran are going to do about the Strait of Hormuz. But President Trump believes that because Iran has been harassing us for 47 years, they've killed thousands of Americans, and they also have the ability, like we're seeing right now, to shut down major economic movement through the Strait of Hormuz and other things with terrorist activity, it's worth it to nip this in the bud and get rid of the regime. But one new piece of polling I thought was particularly interesting about who supports this action in Iran.
Take a look at this Fox News poll that came out during the past week. Net approval rating of the current U.S. military action against Iran. Look at that. Overall, Fox News shows a dead even split. But look at those who served in the military. Significantly higher support for the U.S. military action currently going on in Iran at plus 20 points.
It's not surprising that those who have served in the military and had friends injured or killed by weapons that were funded by Iran, whether it was by Iran or through their proxies, Hamas, Hezbollah, and others, want to see Iran finally, the dangerous, violent regime, finally taken out of play. Over the weekend, you likely heard a lot of news about delays in airports, and one major dominating reason behind that is the Democrats' shutdown of the Department of Homeland Security, which has cut off all paychecks for TSA. Now, Hakeem Jeffries, seemingly either forgetting that or hoping you forgot it, tweeted this: "America's at war, TSA agents aren't being paid, and this guy's playing golf. Why are House Republicans continuing to support this train wreck?" Now, again, you have to remember the fact that it is Hakeem Jeffries and the Democrats who have shut down DHS and are holding back paychecks for TSA agents. So it's a little bit bizarre that he'd be tweeting about President Trump's role in this when his party is holding those paychecks back. But this has gotten very, very precarious. There were a number of major incidents over the weekend. First, here's Kansas City. Travelers were evacuated at the Kansas City International Airport after a possible threat, prompting an FBI investigation. And then over in Nashville, there was a bomb threat on a plane. So again, consider the fact that right now, while we are in a major conflict with Iran, the Democrats in Congress are withholding paychecks for TSA agents and the rest of the Department of Homeland Security to protest ICE, even though, as we know, ICE is funded until 2029. On Saturday, during a protest outside Gracie Mansion, the home of New York Mayor Zohran Mamdani, there was an attempted terror attack.
You don't get to come from outside and then tell everyone else.
Now, because it's 2026 and everybody at every event is filming everything, we have a very clear image of what happened here as this person threw what appears to be an incendiary device and yelled Allahu Akbar. But for the full rest of Saturday and even into Sunday, media reports on what happened seemed almost intended to obfuscate. First, NBC New York, multiple arrests made after suspicious devices found outside Gracie Mansion, home of Mayor Zohran Mamdani, during anti-Islam rally and counter-protest. From ABC News, police arrested several people after a smoke-generating suspicious device was thrown during a protest at Gracie Mansion. But here's the NYPD clarifying what actually happened.
This is being investigated as an act of ISIS-inspired terrorism. Preliminary test results determined that these were not hoax devices nor smoke bombs. They were improvised explosive devices that could have caused serious injury or death.
Now, many people will note that this attack, in a lot of ways, seems similar to the Boston bombing, in which young men threw homemade incendiary devices intended to blow shrapnel, like nails, different metallic objects, to do a lot of damage to everyone in the vicinity. Very similar to the Boston bombing. And now we've learned a lot more about the two suspects.
Both sources telling CNN that both men that were arrested following these protests in relation to those two explosive devices admitted to having been inspired by ISIS.
And this from Fox News' CB Cotton. My sources say the two suspects, Amir Balat and Ibrahim Kayumi, made pro-ISIS statements while in custody. Investigators are looking at their past travel to Turkey and potential other locations known as terror training grounds. Investigators searched their homes in Newtown, Pennsylvania, Kayumi's home, and Langhorne, Pennsylvania, Balat's home. And I'm told other people were taken into custody. Note, not arrested. So again, a major terrorist attack was attempted right outside the mayor's residence in New York City. And first, a lot of media took a long time to explain what actually happened there, but the reaction that I think is perhaps the most notable and getting the most criticism is from Mayor Zohran Mamdani.
Saturday, a protest was held outside Gracie Mansion, where I live with my wife, Rama. Neither of us were home at the time. This was a vile protest rooted in white supremacy entitled Stop the Islamic Takeover of New York City.
So again, it has been more than 24 hours since this attack happened. It's actually been closer to 48 hours. Zohran knows that a radical Islamic terror attack was attempted on people because of a protest, and yet he is still talking about the protest, which suggests that he is justifying that terror attack as the cost of doing business for free speech in New York City and in America. And that is a huge, huge problem. And I think that the mayor who ran on globalizing the Intifada has a lot to answer for. Last week, early voting began for Virginia's radical redistricting effort. Before I get into the four main points I want to make about that very quickly, Abigail Spanberger ran against redistricting. Here's a clip of that.
You know, I think one of the largest issues plaguing our country is the issue of gerrymandering. I work with many, many people who their only electoral concern is whether or not they have a primary.
So again, consider just how absurd that flip-flop is for her to now be the face of this effort. But with that in mind, I want to begin with 4 reasons this gerrymandering is so radical and extreme, and why I hope normal people of both parties in the state of Virginia will reject it. First, the simple unfairness point of this. This is a state President Trump won 46% of that had a Republican governor 2 months ago. Will only have 1 of 11 seats, or less than 10% of the congressional representation. But important to note, 65% of the state voted for the Independent Redistricting Commission and the current maps that Democrats are trying to throw out in this partisan exercise. Number 2, this map will give Fairfax County 5 congressional seats. You'll see that Fairfax is split so that 5 different districts have a population center there, which will then decide for the rest of the state. So 5 out of 11 seats, even though Fairfax County has about 1.1 million in a state of around 9 million. They're going to have a little bit less than half of the representation of the state. And why that matters? Fairfax County right now is the hub of some of the worst policy in the entire country. The case of Stephanie Minter, the mother who was murdered outside of a bus stop by an illegal immigrant who had been previously arrested 30 times, who prosecutors had ignored multiple warnings about the fact that he was violent and had a history of stabbing people. Their policies in Fairfax County are going to be exported across the state when they're given power over it through this outrageous redistricting. The third piece I want to highlight there is corruption. It is incredibly corrupt how Democrat elected officials were able to draw their own districts to make them as uncompetitive as possible ahead of running for them. First, this. From Virginia Scope, House Democrats drew maps with multiple candidates in mind. Now, one example of this is Dan Helmer, a name that you might have heard before. He has run for Congress several times and keeps losing and doesn't actually have any smart ideas to run on. He just really wants to be in Congress. Well, after losing at least 3 times now, he believes he's got his new shot to win because he has drawn his own district. This is the 7th district that looks like a lobster. You'll see up at the top there's a tiny notch. That is Dan Helmer's neighborhood put into this district where he believes he'll have a better chance to win. New York Times, an architect of Virginia's redistricting, will run for a new seat himself. And again, for that side-by-side showing the lobster, shout out to the good Dr. Richard Harambe on Twitter who submitted this. And then the fourth thing about this that I think is particularly Orwellian is the ballot question that Virginia Democrats wrote that people are actually going to see when they go into the polling place. Should the Constitution of Virginia be amended to allow the General Assembly to temporarily adopt new congressional districts to restore fairness in the upcoming elections while ensuring Virginia's standard redistricting process resumes for all future redistricting after the 2030 census? So again, they're saying that we need to wipe out 4 Republican congressional districts and let these lunatic, corrupt Democrats draw their own districts in order to restore fairness. How outrageous is that? That is the exact kind of thing that makes people hate politics. Axios has a great deep dive into the Democrat Party's current problems. Ken Martin's DNC debacle. Donors, operatives, and some DNC members are questioning his leadership, fundraising ability, and handling of the party's still secret autopsy of the 2024 election loss. I think there's a number of reasons this is a huge challenge, but the biggest one for Democrats is the fact that they don't have centralized leadership. Normally, the chair of the DNC acts as a sort of figurehead to work alongside the actual Democrat power brokers. In the past, it was people like Barack Obama, Nancy Pelosi, even Harry Reid. Right now, Democrats have no centralized leadership. It's definitely not Chuck Schumer and Hakeem Jeffries, who are some of the most unpopular, statistically, Democrat leaders in history. So Ken Martin's out there trying to essentially barrel forward when the only unifying connective tissue Democrats have is hatred of Donald Trump. And there's no frontrunner, as we talked about from polling that's shown. No Democrat is really running ahead of the pack. CNN called it a clown car. And part of the reason for that is you still have people like Kamala Harris thinking about whether or not they want to get back into it in spite of everything. This from Politico. Kamala Harris is buying time, but Democrats are looking ahead. Somebody finished with Democrat politics wouldn't have responded to camera when President Donald Trump attacked Iran, wouldn't have returned the favor for one of her 2020 campaign co-chairs by wading into the Texas Senate primary to support Rep. Jasmine Crockett. And she wouldn't have recently brought back one of her top aides from the 2024 race, Brian Fallon, back to her circle in a more formalized fashion as she recently did, according to Democrats familiar with the move. I think it's interesting to tout Kamala Harris's endorsement of Jasmine Crockett right before her amazing underperformance and flop as a reason that she might still be a viable 2028 candidate. But it does highlight the fact that Democrats don't have any centralized leadership, and they're certainly not moving towards Gavin Newsom. Speaking of Gavin, first, to set up our small discussion here, I want to highlight an interview that he held with Katie Couric.
Do you have a Zoolander problem?
No, Jesus. Yeah, Zoolander.
Are you just ridiculously good looking?
Yeah.
Now, a lot of reasons that's notable. For one, it does not help Gavin to have these softball vapid interviews where he's asked about being too handsome. But also, consider the fact that Katie Couric was seen as the person who ended Sarah Palin's political career with her hard-hitting interviews back in 2008. My, how times have changed. But another area that this highlighted Gavin's weakness was in an interview where he was asked this.
What is your defined political project? Like what throughout your career and like that. Right now? Like what is the thing you want to accomplish like politically?
So this is a very basic, what do you stand for? What do you want to be known for? What is your tentpole issue? And you'll notice Gavin does not respond very clearly.
I don't have like a brand. I don't have a tag, "Make America Great," or I don't, the Great Society, or something like Medicare for all the billionaires. But but for me, no So it's just standing up for ideals, striking out against injustice. It defines my why in every way, shape, form. Stand up for ideals, strike out against injustice. I'm a Sarge Schreiber Democrat.
Now that word salad is why we refer to Gavin Newsom as the Kamala Harris of Beto O'Rourke's. He was asked a softball. What do you want to be known for? What do you stand for? What is one issue people can really rally to you around? He couldn't give a clear answer. And I think the reason is he doesn't have one. He doesn't have any ideas. He wants you to look at him and think, this is the guy who's not Donald Trump. And he has, handsome hair, things like that. But he's got no ideas and no records to run on. But he's about to launch a $20 million taxpayer-funded campaign to try and fix his own image. From the LA Times, Governor Gavin Newsom plans to spend $19 million promoting California and dispelling myths driven by misinformation and political rhetoric in a marketing campaign that would run through the final months of his administration as he weighs a potential run for president. And I'm guessing, like everything Gavin Newsom touches, that $19 million will likely go to operatives and NGOs very close to Gavin Newsom. So now he's using taxpayer dollars to try and correct the image that he's created by wasting hundreds of billions of dollars of taxpayer money in making the state the one people want to leave the most. Good luck turning that into a strong presidential run. That is all the time we have for today. But for our first today, before we go, I want to preview one thing we're going to be talking about tomorrow. Here's James Tallarico.
Something that you love that's not family or friends.
I love, I'm just saying this because it's on my mind, the trans children.
That should be a lot of fun. So we will see you on Wednesday. Please leave us a review, like, subscribe, and tell your friends. Have a great day.